Hey, everybody, welcome to Odd and Untold, the podcast where we talk about all things strange and spooky. And this being spooky season, we're continuing with some of our favorite movies. This week, I thought we would do ghost stories and haunted houses. And joining me from his own haunted house there on the moors of England, my buddy John, once again on the show. Dude, thanks for coming on once again.
Thank you for having me once
Yeah,
again.
yeah, of course. You're like the de facto co-host now. You're on more than anybody else. And I'm calling in all those favors from all our years knowing each other. So
Well, it's an honor and a privilege. I really enjoy being here and doing this, helping you out.
yeah, no,
So
I know you're doing. You always have ideas, and we're probably backlogged by 5 or 6 episodes because we have ideas about other movies to talk about and music and genres of movies to talk about. So I figured, Halloween, ghosts, haunted houses, you don't get much more Halloweeny than that. And I've been a little Bigfoot heavy lately, so good time to kind of change focus a little bit and talk about ghosts and haunted houses. And so, yeah, so this week we're going to talk about some of our favorite haunted house movies and ghost movies. And I know you've sort of separated them into two genres that we've made up.
yeah,
uh,
it's totally made up. I
totally made
figured
up.
when I was trying to organize it, I figured, all right, let's have some movies where you don't see anything at all. You don't see a ghost, you don't see a demon, you don't see anything. And another section where it's completely overt. It might be like a main character, the ghost. And it's all different genres, like subgenres, even within there. Like there's a romance in there, there's a comedy in there, whatever. But still divided by whether you see them or whether you don't see them. And I think the big appeal of that is that if you see them and you like the iconography and it speaks to you, especially if it makes you afraid, then it's very effective. But if you don't like the depiction, you don't like the CGI or whatever it is, then you just completely tune it out, and then the movie doesn't work. But when you don't see something, I think the big appeal is that whatever is in the shadows, whatever it is that you don't see, your brain fills in. So it's whatever makes you scared. And it's not even like a direct thing. It's just how you feel and you don't know what's there. And it's freaking you out. So it could be like you go to your garage at night and you hear some sort of strange sounds. You don't know what it is. God knows what it is. So you really want to be careful, cautious. It's just that fight or flight response kicks in, I think, with the unknown. Whereas if you see something and you think it's cheesy looking, there's no fight or flight, you just tune it out.
Yeah, and it's everyone's got their preference. For me,
Mm-hmm.
personally, I prefer not seeing things. I like the inferred scares are scarier for me because yeah, like bad CGI or
Same.
a bad puppet or a bad makeup
Oh yeah.
can take you out of the moment, or you're waiting like 85 minutes to see the monster, if you will, the ghost or the
Mm-hmm.
creature or the demon, and then when you finally see it, you're just like, oh, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Depending on the creature creator, and but some of them are very good, and again, sometimes seeing these things does help because now you're seeing the creator's vision. But I know everybody's got their preferences, and you talk about like movies like the Blair Witch Project where you don't see anything, and we're not going to
Right.
talk about that
Exactly.
tonight because that's not really under the ghost or haunted house genre. But a lot of people criticize that movie because they're like, well, you don't see anything, and it's like, well, that's the
Right.
whole point. The whole point is that you're not seeing it, you don't know what it is, so your brain fills it in. And for me, that was just so much more terrifying as someone who does go camping and hears things in the woods at
Oh
night
yeah. God, yes. That's the
because
reason I don't go camping.
but yeah, so for me that's my preference, and I'm not you know judging anyone whose preference is for the other, because there are some great movies where you do see the monster or the creature or the ghost or whatever it is, and we'll talk about some of those, and they're very good, so it can be done well. It's just everybody's got their preference. So I thought it was cool that you broke them up into those two sort of categories.
Yeah, really sometimes it's just a mood. Like what mood are you in? Like if you want to see a monster movie and you want to see a Godzilla movie, you want to see Godzilla, fighting King Kong. You don't want people talking about it. You actually want to see it. But with I think if even if we just talk about our own personal experiences, there have been some times when we have actually seen things, but the majority of things that have happened to us were unseen, and that was just as effective, maybe even more so than actually seeing something.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes, it's the devil, as they say. At least if
Yeah,
you know what you're dealing with, you say, oh, okay, it's some giant Wendigo and it's going to chase me and, probably gore me to death.
yeah,
But at least you know how
right,
you're going to die. Whereas if you don't know, you're just like, what the hell just did that?
yeah,
Was it a raccoon up in the attic or is it,
right,
Captain Howdy?
yeah, exactly. What are the footsteps in the attic?
Right. Right. So do you want to start us off with some movies that
Yeah, so I have a whole. I'm sorry, what were you saying?
no, I was going to say we agree on most of these.
Oh, great.
So yeah.
So I'm going to start off with the films where you don't really see anything. Now, I sent you over a file, and the file says that there's a spoiler warning. Just
Oh
in case
yes.
right, just in case you haven't seen these films, we might fudge some details because we don't want to spoil um, a surprise or a twist or whatever. So we're slightly going to fudge these things. It's not like we don't know these films. It's that we're just fudging details so that we don't take away from anybody's experience. And I got that idea. I mentioned it on a previous podcast. I was watching an interview with M. Night Shyamalan, who we're going to be talking about in this episode, and he says that there's no limit on spoilers. So his movie came out in 1999, the one that we're going to be talking about, but we are still not supposed to reveal, what happens in the film. And I totally respect that, because people, especially with streaming services, people come to these movies at different points in their lives, and they should just experience them for what they are, as if they were seeing it for the first time in a movie theater, like some of these films we saw in a movie theater for the first time, and that experience is really special.
Right. And I will try to put timestamps on this episode just so you can see what movies we're talking about. And if you don't want any spoilers, you can kind of skip that movie and just go to the next one. I hope all of you are familiar with most of these movies. If you're here on a paranormal podcast, I hope you've seen most of these movies. I mean, not all of them, but there's some movies on here where if you haven't seen it and you're watching a paranormal podcast, go watch these movies and then come back because you're missing out on some great stuff. But
Oh
yeah,
yeah, I think
so spoiler warning, but I will try
right.
to put timestamps on here.
All the videos that I've seen where there's timestamps and things like that, I always really appreciate it because it makes it easier. Because I feel strongly like I don't want to know anything about a film before I watch it. I try to avoid trailers. If something looks interesting, I just want to go in and experience it. So I want to make sure that your audience also has that same experience if they haven't seen any one of these films, and maybe they've seen a whole bunch of them or all of them or even more of them, but I don't want to spoil it for anybody.
Yeah, and I often forget that I can do timestamps, so that's all.
Yeah, it's fun.
But
I like what I appreciate it when people do that. So the first one I wanted to mention was the Amityville Horror of 1979. Now, as you said, we did a whole episode on this. This was episode 63, Amityville Horror or Hoax. So we're not really going to talk about it, other than I think it's such an important film in this haunted house genre. I mean, I don't think you can talk about haunted houses and not talk about Amityville Horror.
yeah, and and we mentioned it in that episode that so many tropes about haunted houses come from this movie
Yeah, exactly.
that, the bloody walls or,
Mhm.
get out, like stuff
Yeah,
like that all comes from this movie. And a lot of people haven't seen it, but they've seen a lot of the stuff that this birthed, I guess, the tropes that have come out of it. So yeah, just we're not going to talk about it too much. Go back and watch episode 63 if you guys want to hear our full thoughts on the Amityville Horror. But yeah,
right.
great movie, great acting, great special effects, and just a real, whether you believe it's a hoax or that it really happened, either way, the movie is just a classic.
Yeah, the movie definitely does stand up. All right. So I think the second film that I wanted to talk about is probably the most obscure on this list. and it is a movie called Burnt Offerings, and it's from 1973, and it's written and directed by Dan Curtis, and some of you may recognize that name. He's very famous for creating Dark Shadows, the TV show, and the two movies that followed after. And it's a very similar, and it predates actually the Amityville Horror, and it doesn't have the exact same tropes, but it does have certain things that are similar. So family moves into a new house, strange things start to happen to each one of them. You don't really see, you don't really understand why these things are happening to them, but they are somewhat seemingly supernatural. So it's a slow burn. I don't think there's ever really well, spoilers, I can't say anything. It's a slow burn. So if you want like a creepy movie, it has so much atmosphere. You don't see anything, but the tension that it creates makes it really, really effective.
Yeah, and that's one I haven't seen that in many, many years. I have to rewatch that one. I remember it being good. I remember bits and pieces of it, but again, it's one of those I haven't seen probably since like high school days, if not even before.
Right.
And I remember it used to be on TV a lot, and
Yeah.
I'd catch it. And again, like we said with Amityville, like just catching bits and pieces of it. And I've seen the whole movie, but probably not from start to finish in one sitting. Um, but yeah, great movie.
Yeah,
So
that's what I discovered with Amityville, that I had never seen that. I had actually seen the second and third one all the way through because I rented those because they didn't show those on television for some obvious reasons if you've seen those films. But Amityville and Burnt Offerings, Channel 9, Channel 11 here in Brooklyn, New York, like we always talk about, showed these movies, and that's the first time I saw it was on television. And I've since gotten, of course, the Blu-ray, and have enjoyed it. And it's shocking because I was a big Dark Shadows fan, and seeing something that didn't involve like vampires and werewolves, this overt horror, what you think about when you think about the classics, classic Universal monsters in one way, shape, or form. This was just a completely different experience for me, and one that I really, really enjoyed.
awesome.
Yeah. Now, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
The third film that I wanted to mention is very similar to that, and in a similar vein. It's called The Changeling, and this is from 1980, and it stars the late great George C. Scott. And this film, no real spoiler because it happens in the first couple of minutes. You see George C. Scott, he's married, they have a little girl, they're traveling, and the wife and daughter are killed in a horrific car accident. And basically, the rest of the movie is about him mourning them in one way, shape, or form. And I love it when films, especially horror films, deal with some other sort of subject, like the loss of someone. And I think that really started with Edgar Allan Poe's stories, which influenced a lot of these movies, where someone is mourning someone or a group of people, and it manifests into an actual haunting. They're literally being haunted by something. That's explored in a new movie called The Babadook. I don't know if you've seen that.
Mhm.
Great film. And in The Changeling, George C. Scott goes the entire film being haunted and trying to figure out, really, he actually reminds me a lot of you in that sense, because he's looking at things from a very rational point of view. There has to be some sort of reason, even if it's outside the realm of science. There has to be a reason, and you can pursue it, and you can actually solve the problem. That's the mindset that he has going into this.
Yeah, I mean George C. Scott's just great in everything he does. We've talked about him before. Yeah. And again, this is another movie I haven't seen in many, many years, and shame on me. Because I know it's good. People always recommend it. You've been talking to me about it for the past couple of weeks, like asking me if I've seen it, and like, no,
Yeah.
I got to find it on streaming and just watch it.
Yeah,
Um,
I just picked up the Blu-ray. That's why, and I watched it. And I'm like, oh my God, that's actually once the one that I hadn't seen, on Channel 9 or Channel 11. And but it always comes up, as you say. People are always recommending it, so I checked it out, and I was just completely blown away. The I was talking about atmosphere and burnt offerings. There's so much atmosphere in The Changeling. It's so good. And then I immediately texted you. I was like, "Have you seen this movie? You have to see this movie." And here we are talking about it.
Yeah, and that's why I like these movies because they are more, quote unquote, reality based, where it's when people tell you about their paranormal experiences, this is the type of stuff they're talking about. It's not the overt monster running down the hallways and things that you're seeing. It's more subtle things. It's like, what was that? Let me go try to explain this. I mean, you see a demon running down your hallway, you know,
It's pretty straightforward.
pretty straightforward, but you hear a knock at the door and there's no one there, or you hear footsteps, or you hear a voice when no one else is home. Your mind tries to say, well, what did I hear? Was that the neighbors? Was that the house settling? You're trying to rationally explain these things because they are more subtle. They're not just overtly in your face, like, hey, I'm a ghost. It's just, oh, what was that? So yeah, that's why I love these movies, because it's more about the atmosphere. It's more about like
Yeah.
the old fashioned ghost story, and not the monster movie, that some of the other movies are, where it's a little bit more overt, like you said, and in your face. And yeah, I mean, George C. Scott, I could watch that guy read the phone book, like he's
So
just
good in this
so
role.
good in everything he does. Just a class act, and a great actor, um, in
Because you
everything.
can see him, yeah, you can see that he's broken by the loss, but he's also a conductor and a musician and very at the top of that game, at the top of that world, and he's struggling, and yet he's doing this investigation, and he's putting on all these hats, and you completely buy it, or I mean, at least we did. We
Yeah,
completely bought it, and just a wonderful, wonderful performance.
yeah. Well, he's always good. So yeah, check out The Changeling.
And I love that you mentioned, actually, I was going to say, like, if you hear a knock at your door at midnight, that especially in New York City, or maybe not just New York City, there's a very real concern, like who's out there. And that reminds me of Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. He hears a knock on his door at midnight, and then he hears a knock at the window, and it's like, what are these things? Is there a real danger?
Hmm.
And your mind just starts filling up with things that could potentially harm you, or and that really takes you into it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So cool. Yeah, Changeling, The Changeling.
The Changeling. Okay. The next one that I wanted to talk about is actually a series, and the series is all based on a novel by Shirley Jackson, who did The Lottery. I think that's what she's most known for.
Hmm.
If you're going to school in New York, you learn The Lottery at some point
Oh
by
yeah.
Shirley Jackson. Great story, great short story. But she also wrote this novel called The Haunting of Hill House. Now that has been adapted three times. It was once adapted in 1963 by Robert Wise, director of Star Trek: The Motion Picture. If you like science fiction, if you like musicals, he also did the original West Side Story, and he also did The Sound of Music. So he likes to go into lots of different types of genres. And this one, I think, for me, is probably the creepiest film on the list. And again, this is a haunted house story. You never see anything. Sorry for the spoilers. Um, Remember, I may fudge things here and there, but it is just so chilling.
Yeah, and this is, again, I think a lot of future movies kind of came from this trope, not necessarily from this movie, but from the story. House on Haunted Hill, or 13
Oh
Ghosts, or
yeah.
like all these movies about
Hmm.
the haunted house, and people got to spend the night there.
Right.
And in this movie, not for spoilers, but there's a psychologist, or a parapsychologist, if you will, who wants to study the alleged hauntings of Hill House, and he brings in uh, a few volunteers to help him. And one of them is like the heir to the estate. He's like a
Yeah.
young guy. He's like heir to the estate, and two other women. And that's all who shows up. And he's paying them to kind of document their experiences, and he just wants to learn and spend a few nights in this house. And things ramp up. And yeah, this is
Yeah.
a creepy, creepy movie. It's all sound design.
Yeah.
It's all sound design. There's you don't really, again, for spoilers, but we already said these are movies where you don't really see the entities. You don't really see anything. There's no jump scares. There's nothing jumping out at you. There's no Freddy Krueger, making jokes, and it's just pure sound design. And I think what's scary about it for me, like what it always scared me was like stuff in this movie is like stuff I've experienced in real life.
Yeah.
And
Same.
just like, and that's what, because it puts you in that moment, in that
Mhm.
mind frame. Whereas again, like you watch some of these other movies, like I've never seen an overt ghost or demon or monster
Right.
kind of running at me, or walking out of my closet, or it.
Thank
But
goodness.
right, thank God. But this movie is just so based in reality, and just everything in this movie I think I've experienced on some level. And again, I don't want to give spoilers as to what certain things are, but like if you watch this movie, try to do it like with surround sound, do it with like a good
Oh yeah.
speaker, do it when it's
Hmm.
quiet and you can turn the volume up. And again, it's a slow burn, but like once
Hmm.
stuff starts happening, it's really freaky. And you and I have been watching this movie since we were teenagers.
Yeah.
My dad actually
It,
got us into this movie
yeah.
because this is like one of his favorites. He watches it a lot, and he turned me on to this movie, and just so good, so good. And yeah, probably my favorite on this whole list. And we
Yeah.
get to it a little bit early here, but
Yeah, it's true. But the quality of it is just really amazing. Left in the hands of Robert Wise, legendary
hmm
director. I mean, he really brings it. He
yeah,
doesn't hold. He did this between West Side Story and Sound of Music. And I don't know how you feel about musicals or how your audience feels about musicals, but those are widely considered two of the best movies of all time.
yeah.
You know, maybe not musicals, because people are very particular about that, but movies, they're just astonishing. So this was at the height of Robert Wise's powers. You don't see a thing, and it's just terrifying. And I agree, the sound design is just amazing, especially you consider, that it was made in 1963. I mean, it's something that would stand up today if it was released.
Oh, absolutely. You put this in the theater, and it's with the surround sound,
Oh yeah.
and yeah, it didn't need a remake. It did get one,
Yeah, we'll talk about
which
that.
we'll talk
I
about.
Before I forget, I want to say also the parapsychologist reminds me of you. Just this very pragmatic mind, looking for rational reasons for why things are happening, and then like all hell breaks loose. It's like, well, how do you explain this?
Right. He's just a proper British gentleman, and he
Yeah,
smokes, which I do not, and I'm not proper in any way. So,
and here I am in jolly old England.
yeah, there you are.
So
And it also stars Russ Tamblyn, who was in
in West
West Side
Side
Story.
Story,
Yeah.
yeah,
So,
exactly. So there's that connection, which I
yeah.
really love. So you get to see him in a different role. He's the heir, I believe. Is that right?
Yes, he is.
Yeah, he's the heir. Yeah.
Yeah, he's like the nephew of. So he's like in line to inherit this property. So he's only there really to be like, nah, there's nothing here. It's not haunted. Um,
And it's perfect for him because of just the type of actor that he was. um he could just like, wow, yeah, this is nonsense, this is nothing, and then all hell breaks loose and you're like, well, is it nothing?
yeah. And the whole cast is great. And like you said, there's some subtext here. There's other, underlying stories and themes that they explore. It's not just the ghosts. It's, loss, it's love, it's some taboos of the time, so really interesting stuff.
Yeah. And actually, speaking of the taboos at the time, there's an undercurrent of physical attraction between the two female leads, which is I wouldn't say that it's overt, especially for the time. It's subtle, but it's, I mean, to anybody who has eyes, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. Um,
Yeah, they don't
uh,
make it obvious, but it's, like you said, anybody who's paying attention is going to be like, oh, something going on there.
yeah, there's like something between these two.
Hmm
And again, for a 63, I think that was really, really pushing it. For a Robert Wise production, I think it was really pushing it.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that, because just for the storytelling and the fact that people come in all shapes and sizes. So I think that's cool.
Yeah, and it wasn't done like in a saccharine way either.
No,
Like it wasn't, and again, without getting into spoilers, it's kind of a tumultuous sort of thing, which I feel like you don't see much these days. These days, everything is kind of cut and dry, and it's you have to have consent, and you have to have this, and you have to, and it's all about checking off all the right boxes, and everything's got to be proper and moral. And there's a lot of shades of gray to it. So I think it's really interesting because yeah, it's subtle and it's brave in its approach to it. Again, I don't want to give spoilers, but yeah, check it out. It was
yeah,
such a good movie. I mean, it's just one I could watch. I watch every Halloween and
yeah.
could watch anytime, and it never gets old. And it's always scary. Watch it late at night with the sound up, and it'll freak
You'll
you
never
out.
be the same again. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's, I know that we're not talking about slashers in this episode, but there's this concept of the final girl that we see there, and it's not like Wes Craven. Nothing against Wes Craven because I love Wes Craven. Invented the final girl, or anything like that. We can go back to 1897 to Henry James's novella, The Turn of the Screw,
Hmm.
and a lot of that, the heroine, is she experiencing these things? Is she actually seeing these things? This is another horror story that has been adapted many times. It's been adapted in a classic movie from 1961 called The Innocents, and also adapted for Netflix by Mike Flanagan, who we will be talking about again shortly, when he did The Haunting of Bly Manor. And a lot of it, especially the repressed Victorian novella from 1897, is it her sexuality that she's repressing. Now, it's not so much a case of that she's a lesbian in that version, but it's just general Victorian mores coming through. It's like, is she repressing her sexuality, and that's what's causing her to be sensitive to these things, to see things that potentially are not there, and that comes up in The Haunting.
Hmm.
That comes up in a lot of different films. So I appreciate that too. So actually, we wanted to contrast the remake of The Haunting, the 1999 version, directed by Speed director Jan DuPont. So, if you've seen Speed, or what else did he do? Did he do The Fifth Element,
Oh yeah.
La Femme Nikita? And then, and then he does this one. It's like, whoa, this is completely different.
Yeah, he's not
So
a subtle filmmaker.
no, whereas The Haunting, Robert Wise's The Haunting, was completely subtle. Jan DuPont is just completely in the opposite direction.
Yeah, so Liam Neeson, Catherine
Great,
Zeta-Jones,
amazing.
Owen Wilson,
Hmm.
and Lily Taylor, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. So that's the four principal cast members. So you got this big budget, big stars, big names at the time. Still, still to this day, big names.
sure.
And yeah, it's pretty faithful to the 63 movie as far as following a lot of the same beats, not all of them, but
Right.
very similar, but for me, not scary in the least.
No, no.
It's almost like contrasting like A New Hope with like The Phantom Menace, where it's everything in Star Wars is practical and subtle and just used only when necessary. And then Phantom Menace, there's just CGI aliens everywhere talking and
Just
popping up and
everywhere.
hey, how you
Yeah.
doing? And it's just you and McGregor against the green screen, and George Lucas threw in tons of stuff. And this remake reminds me of that. It's like a really, I mean, it's my analogy, so I think it's good, but I think it's a good analogy because this
No, it is good. It's around the same time period as well.
right,
So
but this
we're
remake is just it's almost distracting, and it's not scary because everything in the house that they're investigating moves. Every statue, every painting, every
yeah,
doorknob,
you
like
see everything.
everything
Everything
just
moves.
everything moves, and it's just not done well. There's nothing scary about it. It's just CGI diarrhea, basically. It's just
Yeah.
CGI poured onto the screen, and these poor actors who are all great actors. I mean, I love Liam Neeson,
Yeah, of course.
Catherine Zeta-Jones is great. Owen Wilson, I have a newfound appreciation for him, with Loki series, and I have
Yeah,
my issues with
same.
that series, but I think he just really did a great acting job in that and just
I
kind of showed
completely
his
agree.
chops.
Yeah.
Uh, Lily Taylor, I mean, she never quite hit those heights as those three. She was always more of like a second tier actress.
No
Not
offense
really a
to
house.
her, of
No
course.
offense to her. I mean, she's a great actress, but she just never kind of broke, into like
Yeah,
household name territory.
right.
Um,
Whereas the other three did.
the other three did, but yeah, great cast and just terrible, terrible execution because of the overuse of the scares and the CGI and
Yeah.
uh,
Even the way that it's lit, I mean, you can see everything. There are no dark corners.
right,
And for those of you who don't like black and white, we should probably mention that The Haunting is in black and white, even though they had color for decades. He
right,
chose to put it in black and white. Same thing with The Innocents that I mentioned before. Just because then you have dark corners. There's things that you can't see. There's things that your mind is going to fill in. What is lurking in the shadows over there.
yeah. The remake is just bright and cheery and
Yeah, there's
like
none of that.
there's portions that happen during the day which just kills the mood.
Yeah,
Whereas the original, I mean, it's even when it takes place during the day, they're in the house and they're not near any windows, so you kind of have this sense of claustrophobia.
oh,
You're just
absolutely.
trapped in this house, even though they're eating breakfast. It's morning. Oh, good morning, good morning. And but
Yeah,
you don't see outside. You don't see the
right.
windows. You get this claustrophobic sense where they're kind of trapped. Whereas
Hmm.
the remake is just it's bright and cheery and everything
This
moves and yeah, it's just
so in your face.
yeah, yeah,
And
terrible.
frankly, that might appeal to a different type of audience, and that might really work because the story at heart, Shirley Jackson's story is just a great story.
Right,
So it kind of depends, what is your cup of tea? What is it
right,
that you prefer? So
right.
people might like that, and that's one of the reasons that I wanted to mention it.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, there was yet another remake by the aforementioned Mike Flanagan. For Netflix, he had two seasons. The first season was The Haunting of Hill House, and the second one was The Haunting of Bly Manor, which I just mentioned. And it's basically taking a book and stretching it out into a limited um, miniseries, 10 episodes. And I can't say enough about how much I enjoy Mike Flanagan's work and what he does with The Haunting of Hill House because he really does interesting things with it. There is so much hidden in the shadows that depending on the quality of your TV and what time of day you're watching it, you will see all sorts of things in the background. If you're paying attention and you're like, what was that? And you're really not quite sure what is going on back there, what he's trying to project. And he does that in The Haunting of Hill House. He does that in The Haunting of Bly Manor. He does that to a less extent on another show that he did called Midnight Mass. He certainly does it in The Midnight Club. So if you want creepy, he's old world creepy, but now in color, not black and white, in color. So there's a very modern feel to it, but also at the same time, this throwback to the 60s and 70s, which was all about mood and setting a certain tone and how you're going to present horror.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet. You've been recommending it to me for a long time now.
Yeah,
It's
for
just
years.
for years. I really just have, but for a long time I didn't have Netflix, and
Yeah,
just
and it's more
lots of
expensive than ever now.
yeah, everything is.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's one of those things where I do have to just sit down and watch it at some point because you have been recommending it. I do love the story, and yeah,
Yeah, but I mean, part of what we're doing here is recommending movies for Halloween. So sit down with Jake. I mean, you guys would love it. It
yeah,
is just fantastic.
yeah, and he's into all that horror stuff, so hopefully I can get him to watch it.
Yeah. So the next movie on the list is less subtle. It is 1982's Poltergeist, written by
Mm.
Toby Hooper of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Life Force, a great vampire movie that hopefully we'll talk about at some point, and written, or I should say, co-written by Steven Spielberg. And it feels so much like a Steven Spielberg film that many have um,
Hmm.
suggested that Steven Spielberg actually directed it himself, but couldn't have his name there for various technical reasons, Directors Guild and all of that. But Poltergeist is certainly less subtle, and but the mood that it creates is also super super creepy.
Yeah, and again, this is a lot of tropes in this one.
Hmm.
The family moving into a new house,
Hmm.
the Native American burial ground
Yeah,
kind of got started again in Amityville, but it's carried over here. And again, we had talked about that in episode 63, where like
yeah,
the Native American burial ground trope just started permeating horror
yeah.
um, all over the place. And it was just, oh, you build your house on a Native American burial ground, you built this on an Indian burial ground, and it just became the kind of go-to thing that if you want, if some place is haunted, oh, maybe there's a burial ground here.
Yeah.
Uh,
And this was only 3 years later, and they really upped that part. I mean, in the Amityville horror, it's kind of like a passing thing. They
mhm,
don't really explore too much. In this one, as I said, it's more overt.
right. So yeah, Craig T. Nelson, Joe Beth Williams, and I love Craig T. Nelson.
Amazing.
I mean, just
Yeah.
he's another one. He's just like a great actor and never really rose to like huge superstar fame, but he's just in so many good
No.
things. Coach, the
Many
TV show
movies,
Coach, many movies.
Coach. Right.
The Incredibles. He voices the dad in The Incredibles. Like
Yeah.
just a good, solid actor in anything he's in. Joe Beth Williams is great in this.
She's amazing.
Yeah, and again, the family moves in, and slowly but surely, weird things start happening, and a lot of funny moments, and the whole thing with the TV and Carol
Hmm.
Ann, and this house is clean.
Yeah.
This is, Zelda, and yeah, and this one's kind of a mix. I know you lumped it in with the you don't see anything category, but there
Hmm.
are potential moments where and again, it's hard to kind of qualify this one because a lot of it is you don't see anything, or if you do see stuff, it's more what I would call like telekinetic. There's things moving, lots of things moving
Yeah.
versus like sound.
Right. We can sort of leave it at that.
Yeah,
Right. If some of these other films are based on their sound design, and that's what makes them creepy. I think this has that sound design, but it also has a visual element to it, which is very creepy. And the
yeah.
music also. Oh, go ahead. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
no, the music is great, and
Jerry Goldsmith,
yeah,
just an amazing composer.
and I enjoy the and again, I don't want to give too many spoilers, but the family is going through this, and they bring in some paranormal investigators, and it's
Yeah.
very science based. It's microphones and meters, and they're
Hmm.
trying to figure out what is going on in this household. So I always appreciate that it's got this sort of basis in reality, and it's reality kind of turned to 11. Um,
I think it's the really the one of the first times that on film we saw that technical element. We had parapsychology in it and before, but we never saw the gadgets. I think this is the one of the first times that we saw the gadgets, and it sort of predates only by 2 years Ghostbusters, which we're going to be talking about in a little bit. But these cool gadgets to sort of detect paranormal phenomenon. And I know that when you were doing your ghost busting, you had some of these gadgets, and it was cool. And that adds a different sort of element to it. That what is supernatural is perhaps it's just paranormal, something that we can't quantify with science yet.
right, like preternatural,
Yeah,
which they mention in the haunting. Um,
exactly. Right.
but that, yeah, it may just be something we just don't understand yet, and that's what these scientists try to do. And then, of course, later they bring in a psychic to kind of help them. And so, yeah, I mean, but again, it's a classic movie. You have to go see it. It's just so good. Um, it's funny. It's got
It's
all the
amazing.
classic tropes. It's got James Cameron, who was in um, Return of the Living Dead,
Yeah.
um, in a smaller role, but equally as good. He's just very good at playing that Weasley.
Yeah, it's sort of similar
Yeah, that
to the role
some.
that he played in Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah, kind of innocent. Naively innocent, but also kind of
Right.
Weasley. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, just a great flick, and there were some. I don't know if you're aware of like the weirdness behind the scenes
Oh
of this
yeah, no,
movie.
yeah. There's
Um,
oftentimes people talk about curses. They talk about it a lot with 70s movies with The Exorcist. They talk about it with The Omen.
mhm,
But this one, I think more than any other film, um, is like real because there was true loss, true tragedy.
right. Right. And you guys can, again, we don't want to spoil that for you. We don't want to go down dark paths, but there's, you can Google like the Poltergeist curse and what happened during the filming and after filming and just to some of the cast members, and very sad and tragic, but who knows if it's really a curse or if it's just coincidence. But the movie itself
Right.
is great. The sequels, not so much.
In truth, I've only seen the second one, and I would say the second one has like really good moments. But overall, it falls a little bit, especially with the special effects.
Hmm.
It's something what you were talking about before. It really takes you out of it. The practical stuff is great, but once you start getting into the special effects realm, is kind of falls short. And I haven't seen the third one, nor have I seen the short-lived TV show. I mean, the it's kind of like Jaws, that we
Yeah.
talked about in the Fourth of July episode. The first one is amazing, shouldn't be compared to anything else. If you just saw the second one in either Jaws or Poltergeist, it's a good film. There's nothing wrong with it. You shouldn't compare to the first one because the first ones are absolute classics.
Right. Right. So yeah, go watch Poltergeist if you haven't yet.
If you haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
Oh, I also haven't seen the remake.
Oh, me neither. I have no interest.
Yeah, because the first one just had such a powerful impact.
Hmm.
I might see it one day. I never, I sort of put these things off, but if I get to watch it one day, I'll watch it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so the next film, speaking of absolute classics, predates Poltergeist by 2 years. It's 1980s, The Shining,
Mm.
written and directed by Stanley Kubrick. Also, Diane Johnson co-wrote it. I want to give her credit. Also a novelist in her own right. And of course, that and the sequel, Doctor Sleep, which many people may not know about, both um, written by the great Stephen King.
Yeah. Another classic. Just Jack Nicholson and his family up
Oh
at
my
the
God.
up at the hotel for the
Mhm.
winter as the caretakers, and spooky stuff starts happening. And again, this is another one I haven't seen in so long, and like shame on me because it's a classic, and I have never read the book, despite being a Stephen King fan and have read, having had read most of his stuff. I haven't gotten to The Shining,
Yeah.
and haven't seen this movie in a long time. But I mean, this is another one that, like, even if you've never seen it, uh, there's the memes out there. There's, here's Johnny with, the axe coming through the
Yeah.
door, and all work
The
and no play make Jack a dull boy, and
the two creepy twins holding hands,
red rum,
blood coming out of the elevators, things that you see in other works, other works pay tribute to it, make fun of it. That's when you have succeeded. People are putting it into their work.
right?
Even
When
something
people,
like oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I was going to say, like, even when people who have never seen the movie know the memes or know the references, yeah, that's a success.
Yeah, you see it pop up in something like Steven Spielberg's Ready Player One adaptation.
Hmm.
There's a whole sequence that features that. I think you see a whole bunch of things in The Simpsons
Oh yeah.
that that are playing tribute to it.
Boy,
So
you read my thoughts. You've got the shinning.
You mean shining?
Shh, you want to get sued? Now look, boy, if your dad goes gaga, you just use that shin of yours to call me and I'll come a-running. But don't be reading my mind between 4 and 5. That's Willie's time.
So, I mean, The Shining had a remarkable longevity, and in part, of course, because of Stanley Kubrick. And there's all sorts of really scary stories about how Stanley Kubrick dealt with, especially Shelley Duvall, and that she was actually having a mental breakdown when she was filming it, and definitely afterwards. Which you hear from time to time, say like with William Friedkin, how he dealt with his actors during The Exorcist. So the directors have a lot of power. And I think when they get to their actors in that way, what you're watching is a real visceral human reaction. It's not acting anymore. It is something else that is being captured on a film. And you can feel how you feel about that. But it's astonishing that it was captured.
Yeah, and I mean that's just, you hear a lot of those stories from back in the day. That's how movie making was done. To get that performance out of the person, you'd have to try to break them, because
Yeah.
in the movie they're trying to break, and you get a much more visceral performance if the person is actually sleep deprived or is actually upset or distressed. And again, like I mentioned, the Blair Witch Project earlier, they did that in that movie. They
Mhm.
kind of starved these kids. They, I mean, they were out there filming a movie and they knew it, but they were keeping them up all night. They were banging stuff in the woods and playing music. And so when you see them on screen and their eyes are bloodshot and they're tired and they're, that's a real reaction. That's not makeup, drops in their eyes or whatever. Like their eyes are bloodshot because they haven't slept.
Yeah, menthol being blown into their eyes.
Right.
That is not what it is.
Right.
It's real.
Yeah. And you mentioned Doctor Sleep. I know you like that movie too. I have never seen that one. Again,
So
I'm
yeah,
aware of it.
that's the sequel. And for Star Wars fans out there, it stars Ewan McGregor, and he's playing a grown-up Danny Torrance, and he has The Shining, or I'm not gonna say it, but as Willie says it on The Simpsons.
The Shining.
Yeah, there you go. um, so he has it, but it has followed him his whole life. And while some people would think that it's a great gift, he considers it a curse. So he becomes an alcoholic. Again, not to give too many things, but there has to be a resolution with why he has this power and can he use it for something that's good. The story is just fantastic. Again, it's actually a sequel written by Stephen King himself. He wrote the original in 1977 and the remake the sequel in 2013. And then Mike Flanagan, who I told you I would mention again, adapted it for his film.
Cool.
And just again, they actually recreated the sets from The Shining.
Wow.
So again, I don't want to give too much away, but the hotel is featured at some point in the film, and it looks exactly like what Stanley Kubrick created. And it's kind of freaky to see it again. It's like, oh my God, how did you do this? And it's practical. It's not like George Lucas would do with green screens and just recreate it that way. They actually recreated the sets
Mhm.
of the first film, so it feels like a real sequel in lots of ways.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I'll have to check it out. I have to watch both of them because, like I said, I haven't
Yeah,
seen the first one in ages. So,
yeah. And I think the director's cut, Mike Flanagan's cut, is better than the theatrical cut, although both are good.
okay.
Sometimes they're completely different films and only one is good and the other one not so much, but
Yeah.
they're actually both good. So it kind of depends how much time you have on your hands.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have 2.5 hours or do you have 3 hours, to watch a film? Okay, now we can branch off into films where you actually do see the spectral forces, where they're overt. Like I said, they might be main characters, and not giving anything too much away. But I think most people are familiar with The Crow
Mhm.
because of what happened very tragically to Brandon Lee while he was filming it. He was shot, and they had to use a stunt double really to finish the film, and they had to change it a little bit. Very tragic thing. But it was also a limited comic book series before that. I believe it's had 4 sequels. It had a
Wow.
short-lived TV show, um, and all of it based on James Olbar's work, and which is a really disturbing story about a man and his girlfriend who were killed on Halloween. I believe I haven't seen it in a few years, but I think it's Halloween
Mhm.
or the night. No, it's Devil's Night. It's the night before Halloween. That's one of the things. And um, again, this isn't a spoiler because it's the main purpose. He comes back a year later on the anniversary of his murder and the murder of his girlfriend to confront his murderers. That's the basic premise of the story. So here we have somebody, is it a zombie? Has he been resurrected? Is he a ghost? It's a little bit unclear exactly what he is. Because in order to exist in this world, you need some type of corporeal form. So it's a fascinating film, and highly recommended.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites. I mean, I love that movie. It's just, it's got the supernatural aspect. It's got like that kind of revenge aspect where it's just, he kicks ass and, you feel for him, and then he comes back and, is trying to exact his revenge. It's just really good. And, again, iconic. I mean, you see that, that makeup and, it's the Crow.
Right.
Pro wrestler Sting, he adopted that makeup and the trench coat and, and looked like the Crow, and that was his Crow years. And, again, one of those that just kind of permeates culture. And even if you've never seen the movie, you see Brandon Lee in the makeup. Oh, that's the Crow. And you kind of know what the movie's about. And yeah, like you said, he comes back as some sort of supernatural being. It's not quite a zombie because he's got his full consciousness. He's not really a rotting corpse. Right. So he's kind of like a ghost, but in corporeal form.
Yeah, because he is corporeal, as you say. He can be hurt, but he also seems to have superpowers.
Right. So it's a weird amalgamation of like zombie and ghost and superhero
all at the same time.
So yeah, just very like unique movie. I mean, maybe not so much anymore, but like when it first came out, and that's why I think it was so big, because it's watching it now after seeing like Marvel and DC stuff, and it's kind of cookie cutter now, like if you go back and watch it. But at the time, I mean, that it really was innovative at the time. You didn't really see anything like it.
I don't think there was a lot of crossover either. I mean, I think people really like comic books, and really comic books, other than some of the DC, at that point, by 1994, there of course had been the Superman movies and the Tim Burton Batman films, but comic books didn't really cross over into films. So you either knew one or the other. And still to this day, I love Marvel and I love DC, but I haven't really read that many comics.
Yeah.
But what influenced what? What came first? The Crow came, and then people saw the possibilities of what you could do in a comic book transferred to a film. And I think that really started changing things.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah. So The Crow, check that out if you haven't seen it, because it's a very different sort of paranormal movie.
Yeah, very different. Yeah. And of course, a nod, not exactly, but a nod to the Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay. So next on the list, one of my personal favorites. Last year, episode 20, episode 28, I guess it was the 20-minute section. We were talking about John Carpenter. We were talking about horror movies and Halloween horror movies, and Halloween came up. Of course, the film that he did after that was The Fog, and I think in maybe some ways it is a superior film. But I just love it. It's a very traditional ghost story. The first 5 minutes, and again, no spoilers. John Houseman, very great actor. He just tells a story to a bunch of kids. They're like having a sleepover on the beach, and there's a bonfire, and he tells them a story. And it's the creepiest thing, and no special effects, nothing. Just a creepy story told at midnight, and it's so great, and chaos just ensues from there. It's kind of a slow burn, but when it gets going, man, does it get going.
Yeah, definitely a slow burn. And again, this is another one of those that I hadn't seen. I just rewatched it with Jake a couple months ago. But I remember it being like on Channel 11 all the time. You'd see the commercials, and it was like the 11:30 movie, 11 o'clock movie on a Saturday night. It was, they played it to death. I can't understand why I don't know it better than I did, because it was like always on. But yeah, atmosphere, spookiness. It's that slow burn. But like you said, it's like a traditional ghost story. There's nothing groundbreaking here or unique.
Nope.
But that's not to say it's bad. It's just if you like ghost stories, if you like traditional ghost stories, this is probably one of the more traditional ones you'll see on this list.
Mm-hmm.
And again, no spoilers, but you do actually see what's in the fog at some point.
At some point, yeah.
But it is a good slow burn, and it's got a little bit of detective work in it. But that atmosphere of like the coastal town, lighthouses and fog and the ocean and driftwood and like just
all that stuff.
All that stuff. And it's just really good. It's really well acted. Jamie Lee Curtis is in it.
Yep. You gotta love Jamie Lee.
Young Jamie Lee Curtis is in it and sassy as ever. Just a great flick. And again, I was so glad I rewatched it. Jake didn't love it as much as I did. Again, I think it was a little too slow a burn for him. But he's 16, so I think maybe when he's a little older, he'll appreciate the atmosphere portion of it more, because it does. It just builds this atmosphere. It's what they call now world building. Like I said, you're building this world of this sleepy little town.
Yeah, that
has this dirty little secret that comes back to haunt it. No pun intended. So yeah, just really good. And special effects are great. I mean, even just for the fog, which I hope is not a spoiler because the movie's called The Fog, but the fog rolling in again for the time it was created, really clever use of special effects. And just like a real good creepy movie. Again, it's not going to blow your mind. It's not revolutionary in any sense of the word, but it's a good old-fashioned ghost story. If you just you got a rainy night, the month of October, you just want to sit in and watch something cool, The Fog is awesome.
Yeah. I especially like watching it when it's foggy out, because it has that 4D element. It's like, man, this is super creepy. Right. What is in the fog?
Yep.
So that's kind of rare, but where I am, of course, it does get foggy often.
Yes.
So I can throw it in and really, really sort of enjoy it. It's like watching I'm actually going to mention it in a second. Ghost Story. Ghost Story was filmed in the winter in Vermont, and so that's a great film. I know that you've mentioned that before. If it's snowing out, you like to watch The Abominable Snowman of the Himalayas, right? Just to get that feel, or like something like The Thing, to get into that feel, that claustrophobic. We're in here and the elements are raging outside.
Yeah, because these are movies where it's like just constant snow and wind. And if you have that going on outside and it's nighttime and you can just look out your window and see the snow kind of going past the street lamps, and you're watching it on TV and there's just snow and wind, it just you don't want to watch The Abominable Snowman or The Thing in like August when it's bright and sunny out till 9:30 at night, and you're just losing the atmosphere there. So
so anytime you can watch The Fog when it's foggy, it's highly recommended. And John Carpenter, of course, did the music again, as he often does with his films. I would say that it has that iconic Halloween theme, but I think the overall soundtrack actually might be better.
Yeah. A little bit more complex.
Yeah.
Halloween was very basic.
Yeah, and Halloween basically just had maybe 3 or 4 themes and some variations based on that. And as you say, The Fog is a little bit more complicated.
Yeah.
And just beautifully done. Beautifully done. There was a remake, and I hesitate to mention it, but I did want to mention it for the simple fact that filming fog is not an easy thing, and getting smoke machines and things like that. But it was practical for the most part. Some effects put on afterwards in post-production, but it was a practical effect. And in the remake, it was all CGI. And not good CGI. And I think I saw it in a movie theater, so I saw it in a big screen, and it just takes you out of it. Like you said, sometimes it's bad CGI. Sometimes you can buy it. Sometimes it's like, oh, whatever, and you just keep on going. I don't think you can overlook it in the remake of The Fog. No offense to the people who put it together. And John was involved with that. So
some things are better left alone.
Yeah, that's fine.
So watch the original, The Fog.
So good. Okay, now I was talking about lots of things have been adapted from novels, like the Amityville Horror or Burnt Offerings, The Haunting of Hill House, The Haunting of Bly Manor. comic books, The Crow. This is just a completely different genre because it's a romance. It's Ghost, 1990, directed by Jerry Zucker of Airplane fame. Don't call me Shirley. And written by Bruce Joel Rubin, who actually does a super creepy movie, also released in 1990 called Jacob's Ladder, which is just amazing. And really no spoilers on that one. But Ghost, starring Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore. What a fantastic film. If you don't like romances, maybe this is not the film for you. But I think just well made, well acted. Rest in peace, Patrick Swayze. What a great actor.
Yeah, fantastic.
And of course, Whoopi Goldberg, who won the Academy Award for her role. Just amazing.
Yeah, great movie. Not really scary. One or two scenes that are a little horrific.
Yeah.
But you're kind of happy they happen.
Yeah.
Not to get too spoilery, but
right. We can leave it at that.
We can leave it at that, but it's horrific. And
yes.
Like, oh my God. But
yeah.
Yes, that's good that happened to this person. But yeah, it's a romance. It's again, it's the memes of him sitting behind Demi Moore while she's doing the pottery, and
it's iconic.
Iconic, that's the word I'm looking for. Yeah.
How many people have paid tribute to it, lampooned it, whatever. It's just people know it, even if you haven't seen Ghost, you know that.
Right. But yeah, very well acted. Not really scary. It's paranormal in the sense that there's a ghost and it's Patrick Swayze and you see him a lot. So you are seeing the ghost. So yeah, but just very, again, he was another one. He was just great in everything. You watch Patrick Swayze and whether he's kicking guys out of a bar or, doing whatever he's doing, dancing, putting baby in a corner or not putting her in a corner.
Nobody puts baby in a corner.
No. But yeah, rest in peace to him. He was a great guy, great actor, and it's just a good movie. It's comedy, it's romance, a little bit horrific in parts. But yeah, very good movie. I don't know what else to say about it, but it because it is what it is. It's a romance. It's
and probably for that reason the most mainstream movie on the list.
Yeah.
With maybe the exception of one more, which we'll get to in a second.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Okay, so the next one is Ghost Story, 1981. And that was an adaptation of a novel by Peter Straub that Stephen King was actually a big fan of. Stephen King talks about The Haunting of Hill House. He talks about Ghost Story. He talks about a lot of other novels other than his own that were a big influence on him, or that he enjoyed them very much. Let's see, actually. On this adaptation of The Haunting of Hill House, this is Mike Flanagan's from Netflix. There's a quotation from him right on the front cover. It says, "Close to a work of genius, really." That's what Stephen King says about it. Wow. So if you have Stephen King's approval, you did something right. So he very much enjoyed this novel, Ghost Story, and it stars Fred Astaire. All of these actors, some in their final roles, classic Hollywood actors in this really interesting ghost story about, again, a small town. It was filmed in Vermont in the wintertime. And these four characters being haunted by something that happened in their past, in their collective past. And that's basically the premise. I'm not going to say anything too much more about it. But the fact that it was filmed on location during the wintertime, it adds a lot of atmosphere to the general production. Lots of great performances, including Alice Krige, who later became famous for being the Borg Queen in an amazing performance then and in this film. So lots of really, really good things about Ghost Story. If I could edit it, I would edit it one more time and cut out certain things and make it a little bit faster. I think actually technically it's one of the weaker films on the list. But if you're looking for a scary ghost story that is set in the wintertime, check it out.
Yeah, and this is another one I haven't seen since I was young. I think my mother used to watch this movie, Fred Astaire and
right. All those classic Hollywood actors.
Right, right. So I think it was just one of those movies that she would watch from time to time, but I don't remember much of it. Um, but I do remember it was good. So I'm glad you're here to kind of fill in some of my memory gaps.
Yeah, I think that was they showed it on Channel 11 all the time.
Mhm.
It was one of
Yeah.
those films.
Yep.
So I just rewatched it about a month ago. And I liked it, and it's not perfect, but like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. I was certainly entertained, and
Right.
it was creepy, so it was effective in what it was trying to do. So
Yeah.
I think that's enough.
All right, cool.
Now, speaking of successful films, mainstream movies, we have to mention Ghostbusters. We cannot talk about um, movies that have to do with ghosts and not talk about Ghostbusters. Probably the most successful here. Maybe I would have to check the numbers. Maybe the last one actually might be the most successful. But who doesn't love Ghostbusters? Written by Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis. Rest in peace, Harold Ramis. And Dan Aykroyd grew up in this interesting family of paranormal researchers. You know, he was around psychics, he was around mediums, he was around all sorts of people. And while Ghostbusters is not based on any real things, obviously, there's a real creepiness to it in certain parts, a real respect for the subject matter. It's not just a lampoon. It's, you know, you're not making fun of the paranormal, even though, you know, there's very funny lines in it, and it is a comedy overall. I think there's a lot of respect for the paranormal and trying to understand it through science and not really being able to understand it.
Yeah, and I think I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's really not making fun of the paranormal. It's sort of making fun of how we interpret the paranormal. And again, you have these characters. We have Winston, who kind of comes on the team later, and he's just kind of the skeptic, you know, doesn't really believe. He's just, you know, there's a steady paycheck in it. I'll believe anything you want. You know, he's
Great
just there
line.
for the money. Yeah.
Mhm.
You have Bill Murray, Peter Venkman,
So
who's
funny.
kind of the, you know, believes, but also just doesn't really take it all that seriously.
But he doesn't take anything seriously,
He doesn't take
really.
anything seriously. So he's just that, you know, sort of character where he believes and he's there for the science. Yeah, yeah, but he's really there to pick up women and quip and, you know, get the fame. Egon Spengler, Harold Ramis is the, you know, strict scientist who, but believer, straight man, believer. He's the one who makes all the gadgets. And then Dan Aykroyd, Ray Stantz,
who is a true believer himself,
who's a true believer. Not really the straight up scientist, but not the funny one either. You know, he's just kind of the true believer and gullible and just wants his answers. So you have this really cool cross section of humanity in there. Annie Potts playing Janine, you know, the receptionist who is kind of the mother to these guys and the moral compass for these guys. Just and that's what it is. It's just all these people reacting differently to what's going on around them and what's happening in the city with the coming of Gozer and, you know, just and again, you know, if you haven't seen Ghostbusters and you're watching this video, I don't know what to tell you.
Well, sorry. Go see it immediately.
Go see it. It's
what
a
you
classic.
Need to do.
It's great. It's just it is ageless. It's timeless. The jokes just work. It's edited just so perfectly. There's not a dull moment in the movie.
Shot on location, and I mean in New York City, it's beautiful. There's a scene right outside the Metropolitan Opera House with Bill Murray and the amazing Sigourney Weaver.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say, just on a side note, one day I was at the Metropolitan Opera and Sigourney Weaver was outside, close to where she was in the film. And of course, I wanted to go talk to her, but you know, she would have had me arrested probably or something. Big fan of Sigourney, right? She would have maced me. God knows what would happen. I mean, she's Ellen Ripley. She would have just kicked my ass. Like,
you would have gotten a flamethrower up your ass.
Yeah, you do not mess with Sigourney Weaver.
Stay away from me, you bitch.
Yeah, it was amazing seeing her. She's amazing in the film. She's amazing in every movie that she does.
Yeah, she's another one.
The cast is just perfect. The writing is amazing. Special effects leave a little bit to be desired, but not bad.
They're a little dated now. Yeah. I mean, it was
Yeah.
1984, and you can tell like
Yeah.
what's a puppet with just a glowy effect put over it, and but it's a comedy. You're not supposed to take it too seriously. It's not really supposed to scare you, even though there is some genuinely creepy moments.
Yeah.
But it hits a lot of the tropes. There's the scene in the New York Public Library. Hi, Rebecca.
Great. Classic scene.
Classic scene of just like the woman in the dress, the woman in white, and the gray apparition, and then of course it shows its true colors. But
and if I might add, I did a tour of the New York Public Library, that main branch where they filmed it. All of that was real. It's not a set.
Right.
And the stacks where that happens also real. There's 9 levels, subterranean levels in that place. Can you imagine going 9 levels deep and going just into these stacks? I mean,
No.
You're going to see something. You're going to feel something. You're going to hear something. Something's going to happen when you go down there.
You're going 9 stories underground in New York City.
Yeah.
You're going to hit something. Yeah, I would love to interview somebody who works at the New York Public Library main branch.
I am trying to get people, but they don't want to lose their jobs, or
I know.
They want to be taken seriously at their jobs or whatever.
Yeah.
But there's stories there. There have to be stories there.
Yeah, I can't imagine there not being.
Yeah.
But yeah, Ghostbusters. If you don't know Ghostbusters, I mean, it is the ghost hunting movie. All the gadgets, the proton packs, and the traps, and all that good stuff. I mean, it's many sequels and reboots and cartoons and merchandise. I mean, it was a juggernaut of a movie. So yeah, check that out if you haven't seen it, and if you have, you know what we're talking about. It's a great movie.
Yeah.
The sequel, Ghostbusters 2.
Again, I think it's just like with Jaws and what was that other film we mentioned? I forget. Poltergeist.
Poltergeist, yeah.
I mean, it's fine. You shouldn't compare it to the first one because nothing should be compared to the first one. The first one's an absolute classic. Second one's fine. The remake, reboot, I'm not exactly sure what it was. I like that. Yeah, a little bit of both. I thought it was good. The director's cut is actually better than the theatrical cut. And Ghostbusters Afterlife, I thought, was a fitting sequel to it. And I don't want to say too much about that one either, but
yeah,
it's also a tribute in many ways to the original, which is cool.
Yeah, definitely.
We have one final on our list, and I don't think you can talk about ghost movies without talking about The Sixth Sense, 1999, written and directed by M. Night Shyamalan, the great. And this movie just really changed, I think, horror forever.
Yeah, Bruce Willis, Haley Joel Osment, and oh god, I'm forgetting the actress's name.
Oh my
God. I love her.
Toni Collette.
Toni Collette.
She's amazing.
Yeah, she's great.
She's amazing.
Yeah, and this is another one, like very simple, very small cast, very tight movie. It's
a very personal story about a troubled family.
Right. But again, it hits on a lot of, I don't necessarily want to say tropes, but it's a lot of what you hear in the paranormal, where, especially with children, where someone is talking to me, and the man in my room, and this again,
or you see grandmom at night,
right?
Something like that,
right? And this takes it, and again, like cranks it to 11.
Yeah, it goes up to 11.
This one goes to 11. But yeah, and it's so good, and it's creepy. It's well acted. I mean, Bruce Willis in his prime, and he does a fantastic. And again, a lot of people think Bruce Willis, you're thinking comedy. You're thinking Moonlighting,
which he was great in. But
he was fantastic in Moonlighting.
He could do so many things. Obviously, the Die Hard series,
action with Die Hard, and again, you think Bruce Willis as the quipping blue collared everyman. He's the cop who's having a bad Christmas. He's the guy at the detective agency who just wants to date his boss. And
yeah, he's Bruno playing his harmonica. He's actually a really good singer and harmonica player, by the way.
Oh, he is.
Checked out his music.
Yeah, he's
good.
Very talented guy, and just such good timing with comedy and facial expressions, but he also does drama really well.
So much empathy in his characters. He's
Yeah,
just a great actor.
yeah, and he just plays the everyman really well. And he
Mhm.
does. And again, we can't spoil what happens in this movie. And again, if you don't know The Sixth Sense, go watch it.
I think you have to see that one before you see anything else
Yeah,
because it's
yeah,
just that important to the
yeah.
genre.
It's great. I mean, the ending is, and again, I think since that movie, people have copied him. He's copied himself, Shyamalan.
Yeah. Hmm.
Uh, but the first time seeing that movie and the ending, it you walk out of that theater just stunned. So if you haven't seen the
Yeah.
movie, if you don't know how it ends, if you don't really know much about it, go watch it because you get invested in it, and then you come out of it completely turned around, and
And you have to watch it again, I think.
then you have to watch it again because all these things start hitting you
Yeah.
and these little aha moments, and you're like, oh man, how did I miss that?
Right. And he
Uh,
does a little bit of it through flashbacks. Again, not to say too much, but if you hear his commentary on it and he's pointing out all of these things. So if you can watch it with commentary as well, such a bright guy and everything is sort of in plain sight. Nope. All practical effects,
yeah,
and great acting. I
yeah,
mean, it's just fantastic storytelling all around. It's an
yeah,
amazing
just
film.
the pinnacle of his career. The
Yeah, I
pinnacle,
mean, how can you come back from that?
yeah,
And
and I think
he's done some great films and some not so great films. But if you have a movie like this on your resume, I mean, this will get you in the door, or should get you in the door anywhere that you want to
yeah,
go.
yeah, just fantastic film, fantastic, and again, very moody. Set in Philly.
Hmm.
Just the nighttime scenes of the boy in his bedroom and out in the street, and just you really feel like Philly in the fall, and again, a very cool autumnal movie.
Yeah, it
Uh,
feels a lot like Halloween for that reason. The Haddonfield that doesn't
mhm,
really exist,
right.
but it feels like Haddonfield in Halloween. It feels like it's autumn. You see the leaves blowing, the leaves that they had to collect and then put out
Yeah,
and then collect and blow it around with some fans and then put it back out and collect it. But it really does have that feel. I
yeah,
mean, the mood that it creates is just so much mood and tension and beautifully acted at the same time. I mean, it's a remarkable film.
yeah. So Bruce Willis, Haley Joel Osment, Tony Collette.
Amazing.
It's a very small cast, very simple story, but so
Very personal
effective.
story.
Very personal,
Yeah.
but so effective. And Bruce Willis, I don't. Did he get an award for this movie? Because he should have.
I believe he was nominated for Best Actor, but he didn't get it.
Okay.
I would have to
Um,
check, but I'm pretty sure.
yeah, I don't think he did, but he's so good in this movie, and it's not the typical Bruce Willis where he's
No,
quipping and winking at the camera and
no.
catchphrases. This is just a purely dramatic performance, and just really, really good and heartfelt, and
So much empathy, so much compassion. I mean, it's amazing.
yeah, just fantastic film. One of my
And
favorites.
if you want like a slasher film, this is not it. That's
No,
not this type of horror movie.
no,
It's some people even don't even call it horror. They call it psychological thriller, which is a subgenre. I don't know.
yeah, because it's not scary so much as it is like unsettling.
Yeah.
There's like an undercurrent of something going on here, and it's not scary. It's not like going to keep you up at night. It's not that type of horror, but yeah, psychological thriller is good. It's
Yeah.
unsettling. It's um, moody.
Facing a like a family problem that you don't know how to solve and feeling completely out of control.
Right.
So I think you can relate to a lot. A lot of people can relate to that,
Yeah.
just on a human level.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And it'll make you think twice about going to the bathroom in the middle of the night. I will say no more.
Yeah. So on that note, we will leave that. So check out these movies, especially The Sixth Sense. Watch that one first. The other ones,
Before
everything
anything
else
else.
we've mentioned on this list, you can Google them. You can go by our recommendations, what we've said about them, if they're going to appeal to you, if they're not going to appeal to you. Again, there's a little something for everybody on here, I feel. Honestly, you put together a really good list.
Thank you. I try.
And these, a lot of classics on here, a lot of variety, little something for everybody. I think, the more subtle,
Yeah.
the more overt, romance, comedy, a little
Comic
bit of
book
everything.
adaptation, like
Comic book,
superhero. It was like a
yeah,
little bit of Yeah, I try to get a lot of different things
Yeah.
to
So
hopefully appeal to whoever's watching.
yeah, but I think there's something on here for everybody. Maybe not everything is for everybody, but there's something on here for everybody. So
Yeah.
awesome. All right, brother. Well, thank you once again for joining me. This was an awesome Halloween episode. I
Thank you
love
for
this
having
time.
me.
Love this time of year, and
Yep.
we got to get together soon and watch some movies
Yeah,
because we haven't done
absolutely.
that in way too long. Many, many, many,
Way
many,
too
many,
long.
many years.
And I have them. I have all my my Blu-rays sitting right here. So I'll bring them over or you come over
Yeah.
and check out some of these films. Revisit them as
Yes.
adults.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
All right, brother. Well, thanks again.
Thank you.
And we will be on again soon. We got vampire movies to talk about,
Zombie
zombie
movies,
movies, Hammer
the
films,
Antichrist, Hammer films,
Antichrist. Yeah, we got so many
so
episodes in the
many,
works.
so many things. Yeah,
Yeah.
are coming. And
Yes.
I hope people like what it is that we're talking about. I think you're doing a great job. I was just telling you that off screen before we were recording. I'm a fan of the show. You know, I'm not just wearing this T-shirt. You know, you're not paying me. I
No,
mean,
I don't have the money to
I,
pay.
yeah, I'm just having fun, talking about all these things. With the exception of that Ouija board episode, I feel a little nauseous even mentioning it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a good time. You're doing a great job, and
Thank you.
I'll keep watching.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah.
And there was a point earlier in the episode, I don't know if you saw me turning around, but I was hearing things in my apartment, which I never do. So I don't
Yeah,
know, what it was.
I don't
Um,
know.
but I'll put it up on screen to just attract people's attention to it. But there was a point where I was like, what is going on back there? Because
Yeah,
it
I
just
know.
sounded like a lot of, and I feel like every time you and I record, either something goes on at your place or something goes on here, or we have technical issues. But I was
During
hearing noises I've never
yeah,
heard here before, and I've been here over a year.
great.
So I don't know what that's about, but
Yeah, episode 63. Um, you went out. I couldn't hear all sorts of things, and then I heard stuff. I heard people. Nobody was
right.
home. I went out there. A cross had been knocked down on the ground.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell? This sort of thing happens, you know. Every time I would put in The Exorcist, and that's why I never put it on anymore, something would happen. So I hope everything's okay over there.
Yeah, I'm
Text
gonna
me,
go.
let me know
Yeah,
what's going on.
I'm gonna check when I get up after this, and I'll let you know.
Get
But
some
yeah,
salt, get some
yeah,
silver, get a cross, get
yeah.
whatever you can get your hands on.
Just arm myself.
Yeah,
My little
immediately.
Van Helsing kit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right, brother. Well, thank you again,
Yeah.
and we will talk soon.
Yeah. All right. Take care.
All right, man.
Thank
Take
you.
care. All right.
Bye.
Bye. All right. Once again, I got to thank my buddy John for coming on and helping out. And he compiled this list. Again, like I said, a lot of these movies I would have put on there as well. But he did all the legwork. He found the directors and the cast and the years and all that stuff. So John's really good at that research, which I am just not good at. So John, thank you again for coming on. I really appreciate it. We got a lot more of these types of episodes coming out. Like I said, we're going to do vampires and zombies and uh, Satan and satanic possession and all that good stuff. Hammer films. So stay tuned for those. We're not going to get to those during the Halloween season. I'm only doing one episode a week here, and we got a couple of weeks until Halloween, and I got some other episodes planned. So probably won't get to that stuff during Halloween, but after. But I figured ghosts and the paranormal is perfect for Halloween, more so than like vampires or zombies, which are appropriate, but I feel like ghosts are the Halloween thing. Just another little shout out. I'm drinking tonight this Odd Nod from Odd Alewives Brewing. So thank you, Laura, for picking up the beer for me. And yeah, I'm going to wrap it up there this week. We have the new merch store, so check that out. I'm going to put the link down in the description below so you guys can find that. I'm going to have some Halloween stuff up you guys can check out, but there's hoodies, there's t-shirts, there's hats. There's going to be more stuff added all the time. As I get to it, it is a little time consuming. And right now, my personal life is a little busy. I'm running around doing a lot of stuff between work and family. It's just been a little chaotic, but I'm hoping that things calm down a little bit soon. But I'm loving seeing my niece and nephew more and just seeing my family more. So good times, bad times sort of thing. But yeah, so let us know what you guys think in the comments. What is your favorite ghost or haunted house movie for the Halloween season? Let us know what you think down below. Do you agree with our list? Do you disagree? Do you have your own recommendations, we'd love to hear. So leave a comment below. If you want to reach me, jason@oddanduntold.com. Shoot me an email. Happy to speak to you. Leave a review on iTunes or wherever you're listening to this podcast. The reviews really help us out. If you're watching on YouTube, like the video, comment. We love hearing from you guys. We love interacting. And subscribe just so you know like when the new videos come out. And we're doing all sorts of stuff. A lot of Bigfoot stuff lately, I know, but we're going to try to shift that a little bit in the coming weeks. So until next time, everybody, rock and roll. Go watch Ghostbusters and Poltergeist and The Sixth Sense if you haven't watched them. Everything on the list is really good. So rock and roll, everybody. Next week.